evening, everyone. We welcome you to a meeting of the Buchanan.
Are you on? Is your mic on? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. We welcome you to a meeting of the Buchanan Community Schools Board of Education. All regular meetings have been posted on our district website, in our central office, and in each district school building. Please be sure you have picked up a copy of this evening's agenda and a Board of Education inquiry form if necessary. Our school board members receive the agenda and all supporting documents for reports and action items several days prior to the scheduled meeting, so they can review information, prepare questions and comments, and are ready to participate fully in the discussions and votes that encompass the duties of their office. Board members follow the agenda and review related documents on their devices throughout the duration of the meeting. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There's a time for regular public participation during the meeting, as indicated in Agenda Item G. If you wish to make presentation to the board during Agenda Item E, please fill out the Board of Education inquiry form and pass it to the board president or superintendent prior to Item G on the agenda. And that has changed. Thank you for your support of Buchanan Community Schools. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lee.
Oh. Mr. Lee.
Here.
Dr. Burnett.
Here.
Ms. Ryder.
Here.
Mr. Wentworth.
Here.
Mr. DeVlamic.
Here.
Ms. Lush here. Ms. Tobler.
Here. Can we have a motion, please, for the agenda for the board meeting of October 19th?
Make a motion that the agenda for the board meeting of October 19th, 2020 be adopted as written.
Support. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lee.
Yes?
Dr. Burnett.
Yes.
Ms. Ryder.
Yes.
Mr. Wentworth.
Yes.
Mr. DeVlamic.
Yes.
Ms. Lush, yes. Ms. Tobler.
Yes.
7 yeas. Motion adopted.
Item agenda D, recognition of visitors. We'd like to welcome Cindy and everyone else that is online. Item agenda E, information reports and new business.
Your mic. Your mic.
You just needed.
Everyone, and welcome to our area.
Maybe not. Is this, can you hear me now? Is it good?
There you go.
Okay. So it wasn't plugged in. So sorry about that. So good evening, everyone. I'll try this again and welcome again. So tonight on our informational part, we do have Cynthia Scott, who will present our audit tonight. And Cindy, go ahead. Thanks.
Can you hear me okay? Good. So good evening. My name is Cindy Scott. I'm a partner at Stevenson and Company, and I am in charge of everything school district that we do firm-wide. So we are contracted business managers for schools. We do compliance testing for the state for our school districts. And then we do regular financial statement audits as well as a lot of other things. So I was very pleased to be able to come on this year. Keep going. And to do the audit for Buchanan schools. So we're going to go ahead and share with you a PowerPoint presentation because I think that's a lot easier to talk through and look at versus going page by page through this audit report. But for those of you here, you should have two bound reports in front of you. And you'll notice in the PowerPoint that I do point out what page of the audit report I'm talking about as well. So it's a nice resource to go back and forth with. There we go. So first off, this is kind of like the index. So if you were looking at your bound report and you were to go to the table of contents, that's what this first slide is showing you. And we're going to go through each one of these components, but I wanted you to have a one place quick snapshot of what we're going to talk about. So first, the opinion letter. The entire reason why we do what we do is for a 2-page opinion letter in this bound report. It's to tell you whether or not this information is accurate and free of material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. And I'm pleased to say that we were able to issue an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can give. We're saying, yes, this is accurate, solid information that you can rely on and make decisions on. Next, beginning on page 3, is what we call the management's discussion and analysis. I really encourage you to read through this line by line, page by page. It's a recap of the current year activity in layman's terms. It's just a really good flow of how the year went. And then on page 10, we start the government-wide financial statements. Now, I want to take a quick second and explain to you, in case you're not aware, how your financial statements for a school district are made up. You have the fund financial statements, which is what the board is going to be familiar with seeing. That's what you budget in accordance with. That's what your finance department has their trial balance in accordance with. It takes each fund of the district and records all the information separately. So the general fund, the food service fund, the sinking fund, and so on. And it excludes all of the long-term pieces like your land, your building, your equipment, your pension liabilities, and so on. It ignores that. So you have your fund statements, and then the federal government once a year requires you to combine all that information into one set of financial data and then incorporate all that long-term activity as well to give you that big picture view of what essentially the net worth would be of the school district if you were looking at it like a business. So page 10 is that government-wide big picture view. And there's 2 huge liabilities on there that we'll talk about today called the net pension liability and the OPEB liability, which is everything other than cash, other post-employment benefits that get paid to retirees, such as healthcare. Those are huge liabilities that are not on your fund statements. It's just on the government-wide, and it's disclosure purposes. We have to record it. But as you can see, $26,842,000 is what your net pension liability is. So that is what the state actuary is estimating you as a district owe for all the current and past employees from the time they retire to the time they pass away. That's the portion that's not currently set aside in a trust at the state. So it's a huge liability. It's a big estimate based on the average age they believe someone will pass away, what the average age is they believe people will retire, the expected rate of return. So there's a lot of assumptions that go into this. It is an estimate. None of us have any say of what that number is. It's all done at the state level and then just provided to you. So it's a huge number. And the reason I'm emphasizing that is it's 26.8 million. The OPEB piece is 5.8 million. It makes you end, big picture view, it makes you end as a deficit of 13,803,000. All the school districts in the state are in this same situation. So I don't want you to be alarmed. Just know that it's informational. It's so that you can see this is what this pension is costing us as a district. But the state does not panic and think that you're really in a deficit. They know better. Any questions on the net pension liability, the OPEB liability? Okay. So big changes from 2019. Now I'm still looking at the big picture government-wide view, so I'm combining all of my funds with this. Big picture view, your revenues increased around $250,000. There's a lot going into this. You had additional state dollars through at-risk and through MIPSers, but those were then offset by the state taking away $175 per pupil due to the COVID crisis and having to pull funds back. You had a decrease in your property taxes related to the refunding bond being paid off. And then you also had a decrease in the excess fund equity payment that comes from the RISA of about $150,000. But at the end of the day, your total revenues did still increase $250,000. On the expense side, again, big picture, government-wide view, your expenses increased over $1 million. However, 935,000 of that was related to changes in that net pension liability, where they decreased the discount rate, the expected rate of return on investment, which increases your liability. So to increase the liability, you have to record an expense, which makes up the biggest piece of that increase. You also had some fluctuations in employees that used to be considered a purchase service that are now considered to be an actual employee of the district. So we see some fluctuations between our purchase services and our salaries and wages and benefits. Because of the COVID closure and having to close your doors for a few months, there was a lot of professional development activities that were canceled, less fuel costs, less utility costs, less custodial costs, less supplies. So we did see a decrease of about $180,000 in those type of expenses related to the COVID closure. And then the other piece is that you were providing more meals. The laws changed in who you were going to feed during that time frame, so your food service costs and the related food service revenues increased as well. Questions on revenues or expenses? All right, so this is just another big picture view of the net pension liability and the OPEB liability. I can't stress enough how much I want you to realize this is an estimate. It is going to change drastically from one year to the next. So on this slide, I'm showing you that your net pension liability increased almost $2 million from last year. And that's after you paid in all year long, lots and lots of money into the retirement system. They decreased your rate, their expected rate, by 0.25, which is huge. It has a huge effect on that liability. I anticipate next year we're going to see that liability go down because of the time frame of when they measure that stock market for governments. It was a better stock market for governments with your new valuation. On the other side, the OPEB liability did go down. The state changed the laws several years ago of who can get into that free healthcare for life system. And because people are not able to get into that system anymore, that liability truly is going down. Any questions on the net pension liability or the OPEB liability? So then beginning on page 12, we get into what you're going to be more familiar with seeing. These are your fund financial statements. This is where you wouldn't want to go into a deficit or the state would step in, but you're nowhere near that. So your major fund this year was the general fund. That means that that fund is having the vast majority of all your activity run through it. And then you have non-major funds, food service fund, sinking fund, and the building and sites debt retirement fund. So let's look at the general fund ending fund balance. There are 5 different levels of fund balance that are recorded. First, you have non-spendable. It means you've already spent the money. It could be inventory, it could be a prepaid expense. It's part of your net worth, but you don't actually have cash to go spend on something. You did have $288 of non-spendable fund balance at the end of the year. The next 2 levels you do not have in the general fund, but those would be restricted or committed. A restricted fund balance is whether by legislation or by donor, it's legally restricted for a specific purpose. You do not have any of that in the general fund. A commitment would be when this board, by formal board motion or resolution, approves this dollars for a specific purpose. That would show up as a commitment. So the next level down is an assignment and then unassigned. By definition, with an assignment, when the board approved the 2021 budget and you approved to essentially dip into the fund balance to make that budget balance, that was assigning the fund balance for next year's budget. So you did have an assignment. And then what's left is what we look at to evaluate where you at as a district. And you ended the year with unassigned fund balance of just over $3.3 million, which is 21.3% of your current year expenditures. Now, my opinion, my rule of thumb for your unassigned fund balance is that you want to be in that 15 to 20% range to be comfortable with the fact that if something happens at the state level and state aid stops coming in, you're still going to be able to make payroll. So 15 to 20% is what I would consider to be a healthy unassigned fund balance. You're at 21.3, you're right where you should be. That's a great job. For other governmental funds, that would be that food service fund, the sinking fund, the debt retirement fund. There was $824,000 of fund balance remaining, and that was 100% non-spendable, restricted, or assigned. Any questions on fund balance? So looking at the general fund revenues, I typically like to show you a 3-year trend for all of your revenues and expenses, but because this was our first year doing the audit and I only received 1 year of data from the previous auditor, I can't do that yet. But next year we'll have that 3-year trend, which I think is even a little bit more useful. But you can see the state sources is where the vast majority of your revenues are coming from. And as I already mentioned, those did increase because of your at-risk funding and some additional MIPSR state dollars, offset by the state pulling away 175 per pupil. But they did go up, so that's great. Local sources stayed almost stagnant. Federal sources stayed the same. Interdistrict dropped 150,000 because of the RESA dollars not coming in for excess fund equity that came in the past. And your other financing sources did increase. It's a slight increase there, but I want to point it out. We're going to talk about it later. But the portion that was transferred as what we call indirect costs from the food service fund to the general fund, it went from 30,000 last year to 60,000 this year. And that was a very needed and important move. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but that's a really good thing to see that go up. Questions on revenues? One other view of your revenues, you can see here, state sources are 79.28% of your revenue. So you absolutely are relying on the state. On the expense side, you can see salaries and wages increasing right in line with employee benefits and taxes. I would expect these to increase and decrease together, as the more you pay, the more tax you pay, the more retirement you pay, and so on. And as I already mentioned, there was a fluctuation with pulling people out of purchase services and putting them into salary. So that's why you're seeing an increase there, while you're seeing the decrease on the purchase service side. And then, as I mentioned as well, the supplies did go down due to that COVID closure. Capital outlay went down. This is based on the portion you're paying from your general fund versus not talking about what comes out of your sinking fund. And then your debt and interest, you see that going up. That was the bus installment purchase payments this year. %83 of your expenses are salaries and wages and employee benefits, 83.06% to be exact. It just shows you that the cost of the district is in the people. That's where you're putting your money. That's where your resources go. And that's what I see at all school districts as well. Those are followed by supplies at purchase services at 7.62%, supplies at 7.37%. Capital outlay at 0.9, and then other expenses at 0.57. Any questions on the expenses before I jump into the footnotes? So beginning on page 17 of your bound report is the notes to the financial statements. I do encourage you as well, just like the management discussion analysis, when you have time, flip through this, read through this. It's going to talk through the accounting policies of the district, how different types of accounts are recorded and handled, and what's included in different types of accounts. There's many pages of information on the net pension liability if you really want to understand that in more detail. But a couple of them that I want to point out to you is that GASB 84, which I know we talked about. I believe we had a virtual meeting during the COVID closure to talk about GASB 84, so I'm not going to bore you with it right now. But because of the COVID closure, the Fed stepped in and said, hey, we're going to implement GASB 95, which allows you to push off the implementation of GASB 84 by 1 year. So you were able to push that off to July 1, 2020. So now you're in implementation period, and we'll have to have that fully implemented by your next audit. So it kind of gave you some wiggle room. Coming in 2022 is GASB 87. I won't go into a lot of in-depth information here because I did with the Finance Committee, but just know that there is a big one coming down the pipe in 2 years that's going to affect how you record your leases, and that you're going to have to start looking at some capital outlay and capitalization policies in the meantime to make sure everything's ready to go. Prior period adjustments. The reason this is important to point out is because if you pull out last year's audit report and you lay it side by side with this year's audit report, the ending balance last year isn't going to match the beginning balance this year. Whenever you have new auditors come in and you have fresh eyes, you'll pick up on things that have just been missed for a few years. And so in doing that, we found 3 errors that had to be corrected, and we corrected it as if it was already in place and done correctly before. So to do that, we had to increase your beginning net position by 126,799 to correct the premium on the bonds that were issued that wasn't calculated correctly. And then we also had to then, for the buses that you have the installment purchase agreement on, those were not capitalized and the liability wasn't booked. Government-wide, we're not talking what you keep in your software, but just government-wide. So we had to make some adjustments there. I believe the net effect was $76,000. 71,305 is the net effect of your overall net position. We increased your beginning net position by 71,305. Last little tidbit on the net pension liability and the OPEB liability, just showing you that statewide, the net pension liability was 60% funded at June 30, 2020, in comparison to 62% funded June 30, 2019. So it went backwards. Even with all the money everybody put in, it went backwards. The OPEB liability, on the other hand, did go the correct way. It went from 43% last year to 48% this year. When we look at your budget, we're required to compare where you start the year with your original budget to where you end the year with your final budget and what you actually do. And so I'm very pleased to say that your revenues were within 2.94% of your budget, your final budget, and your expenses were within 3.73% of your final budget. The state's rule of thumb is that they want to see you within 5%. That's how they know that you're using your budget as a management tool as it's designed. So this is a tremendous job. This is a great job to the board, to the finance committee, to the finance director. That means you're actually using it the way it's intended. You're staying on top of it. And this year, especially with all the unknowns, especially with the state aid all the way into August, fabulous job. On page 50, it starts some extra information, just additional guidance for you, some resources. We combine or we detail out all of those non-major funds that aren't detailed out in the front, like the food service fund and so on. And then we also have, for the general fund, a detailed statement that I encourage you to look at. It's a great resource if you're wanting to drill down into more in-depth information. For your general fund, we take all of your revenues and expenses and we show you what did you have last year, what did you have this year, and what did you budget for? And it's all the way down by department and object. So for example, if you want to know what your elementary school supplies were this year, you can look at what were they this year, what were they last year, what did we budget? And we break that down for you in the back. It's a really good resource when you're trying to start working on next year's budget. Any questions on the financial statements before I jump into the single audit? So then the skinny bound report that I gave you is your single audit. The single audit is where we have to report on and test your spending and your compliance of federal dollars. And so for your single audit, this is required when you spend more than $750,000 of federal dollars in a year. You had 1,087,691, and we tested your child nutrition cluster, which is $585,000. So we tested over 50%. We're required to test at least 40%. Now, we did have one finding with our single audit, but as I was mentioning to the finance committee, if there is such a thing as a good finding, this would be a good finding. Bottom line, what the U.S. Department of Agriculture requires with these child nutrition cluster dollars is that you cannot hold in your fund balance more than 3 months average expenditures at any one time. So the measuring point is June 30, 2030. So when we look at your audit report, we have to take what is your ending fund balance in the food service program, and does it exceed 3 months average expenditures? And it did. And it did last year as well. So when I say if there's such a thing as a good finding, it's a good finding to have too much money in your food service fund. So here's where we're at. Every single school district this year that I audited this program in has this finding, because with the COVID closure, revenues were flowing into schools faster than they could spend them. So what your reaction to this is you have to come up with a plan of how you're going to spend down the dollars. And I know that through talking with Trisha and talking with the finance committee, that plan's already in place. You have new flooring going in, you have a full-time food service director. So I believe this is going to correct itself. But just so you know, what the offside is if in a year, when this measurement is done again, if you're still in the same boat after 1 year, the state will recapture the excess. But it's a good problem to say, hey, how do we want to spend these dollars? So this now, if we go back to the comment I made earlier when I said that your indirect costs went from 30,000 last year to 60,000 this year, that's a good thing because that reduces that excess. So what indirect costs are these are the expenses for the food service department that the general fund is paying. These are your custodial costs, your utilities, your business office expenses, your paper and your checks for printing checks. It's all of those costs that don't actually flow through the food service that benefit the food service. So there's a calculation that's done and you can charge up to that amount. 60,000 was below that amount, but it was a healthier number. So I do encourage you to keep doing that, charge the higher amount because it's due to the general fund and that will help reduce this excess. Any questions on that? Finally is the management letter. This is a letter that's loosely enclosed in the back of your thick report. There are 2 appendices to this letter. The first appendix is my required communications to you. What are the significant audit findings? Are there any current year changes in accounting policies? No. Next year there will be with GASB 84, but this year, no. Are there any significant estimates? Yes. Net pension liability and OPEB liability. Can't stress it enough. It's an estimate. Were there any difficulties encountered? No. We were able to get all the information we needed timely. They were ready to go when we got here. As far as an audit goes, it was a very smooth audit, even in light of the transitions of it being a first-year audit. There were no disagreements with management. Management represented to us that they provided everything to us as accurate as they could. They're not withholding information from us. We're not aware of management consulting with any other auditors for a different opinion. We gave you the highest opinion that we can. There's no other opinion out there that's higher, so I wouldn't anticipate that being the case anyway. And there are no other issues or matters that we're not going to discuss. So then the second appendix is our management comments to you. And there are 3 different levels of management comments. The first 2, by definition, the material weakness and the significant deficiency, by definition, those are areas that are significant to the financial statements. So it has to be some component of the financial statement that's significant, that it's reasonably possible something could go wrong. It doesn't mean anything has gone wrong. It's reasonably possible that something could go wrong. And then where they separate is that if it did go wrong, if it could be material, it's a material weakness. If it wouldn't be material, but it would somehow be consequential to the district, it would be a significant deficiency. So that's how those are defined and separated. We have no material weaknesses. That's huge. That's a great thing. We do, however, have a significant deficiency related to the activity funds and athletic fund receipts. This is the exact same comment from the report I gave you in February. Nothing has changed. I don't want you to think that something's happened or that people aren't following through. What it is because the COVID closure happened right after my report, your building administrators, your athletic personnel, they haven't had time to implement my recommendations yet. I think there might have been a month from when I presented to when the buildings closed down. So I didn't think it was fair to retest it yet. I want them to have a proper amount of time to truly implement my recommendations. So I'm required to disclose because it occurred during the time frame I'm auditing, but I did not want to retest it and put them at an unfair advantage or disadvantage. So next year when we come back, we will test those areas to see if the recommendations we made in February were in fact implemented. For other matters, these are things that I'm required to disclose to you, but they are not a material weakness or a significant deficiency. And all 3 of these are just compliance issues. They're state compliance findings, so I have to disclose them. The first is the competitive bidding for the sinking fund. Again, just like before, this is what I've already presented to you in February. There were no new projects that we had to test. There's no new findings, but because the bidding issue occurred during the time frame we audited, I have to disclose to you that that was an issue. The district website, same thing again. There's just a couple components still missing, same as what we talked about in February. So that's a compliance finding that I have to disclose. And then finally, the food service fund equity that we just talked about. Any questions on these findings? Last year's audit report, the previous auditors did disclose the same finding with the food service fund equity. So that has been ongoing. So, but I am thinking with the changes that have been made, I'm really hoping that'll be gone next year. Any other questions for me?
Cindy, with the food service, you said that could only be ongoing for 1 year, but we're in year 2, or how do we?
Correct. The rule is you get the finding, you have 1 year to correct it, or else the state takes it away. But, and thank you for bringing that up. Because of the COVID issue, the state granted a 1 year waiver on that finding. So anyone who had that finding in 2019, they were given a 1 year waiver to fix it.
Okay.
So had that not happened, they would have recaptured the difference.
Thank you.
I had one question is, in our board policy, we have that we should have our fund balance be 2 months of expenses. So it's, we calculate to be 16.6% or 7%. What is the absolute minimum you would recommend to a school district to have for a fund balance?
Oh, I don't know that I have a minimum that I would recommend, but what I am going to recommend, because I feel like 15 to 20 is safe, but that doesn't mean if you're at 10%, you're going to close your doors tomorrow either. Because I see a lot of school districts that operate with very low fund balances and they make it work. But man, it's got to be awfully nerve-wracking budget time every year. But what I do recommend is that you come up with some sort of a game plan, and you might already have this, but I like to see them in writing. So I recommend that boards actually get a game plan in writing, make it a living document that you can constantly be tweaking and modifying and working with of all of your plans. Make it like a 5 to 10 year plan of expenses that are going to not come through your sinking fund, but things that are going to have to come out of your general fund. Maybe you know you're going to need to buy 2 buses in 5 years and it's going to have to come out of your general fund. If you know that, commit those dollars in your fund balance now. If you have the dollars to commit. And that way, if you commit them, remember I told you about the 5 levels of fund balance? So if you commit the money that you're going to need for school buses, then it's going to take your unassigned fund balance down to where it really is at. And then you can look at that number and analyze that and say, okay, we're still okay. I don't know if that's, I know I'm not giving you a percentage low, but I don't like giving a low bottom line number.
Okay.
So when you're saying our fund balance right now, it is, we have it set as our board policy as what?
16.
It's 2 months.
2 months, okay.
And I think that's
Do we need to work on any of our policies to match where we're at? Because I don't think we've changed it. That was my other question.
Yep, I think your board policy at 16% or 2 months. I mean, I think that's a very realistic policy to have. I would just encourage you to really start thinking through, do we have a long-term plan of things that are going to have to come out of our general fund? You know, maybe this is part of your building committee. I know you have a sinking fund committee that talks about what projects are going to happen. Maybe that same committee can be saying, okay, well, here's some other projects, but that can't be spent out of sinking fund. It's going to have to come out of our general fund. So let's go through the motions of actually committing those dollars.
Absolutely. So I was just talking to, I think, Daryl, part of who is like, he's going to be leading that committee out and thinking about our 5-year plan. How does it align with our strategic plan as well? So that we can start planning projects and things that we might need down the line. One of those big things is a facilities assessment. So an updated one. I think there was one done in 2017. If I'm not mistaken. And so we know that we need to update that. So if we do that, we can kind of go from there in developing what that plan would be.
And the reason I ask that is there's many who think our fund balance is too big. But I mean, real quickly, you can spend it on a roof or buses and it's gone. So we need to maintain some of those dollars. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like I'm trying to see, throw
Yeah.
to you as the auditor to give you a recommendation. But I think like that's part of the reason why we have that 2 months. We need to have a cushion for those additional expenses, and we can choose if we have a high year of normal expenses that we maybe postpone some of those expenditures for another year. So
If you look, I think this year with everything we've been through, I mean, this year's been eye-opening in so many ways, but if you look at what happened, at one point in time, they were even speculating potentially up to $2,000 a pupil of cuts. At one point in time, they were saying you might have to be looking at. That is absolutely detrimental to a school district. And if you don't have a fund balance that's going to allow you to survive that, that would just be mass destruction. I mean, that would be huge. So I think this year was a real eye opener for a lot of districts of saying, oh my goodness, we need the fund balance that we have. And that's why to me, 21% is not too much of a fund balance. You're exactly where I think you should be. I just think now you should take it the next step and actually commit the dollars that you know you're going to need in the next 5 to 10 years. Commit those dollars so that you don't get yourself into a bind. And so, committing the dollars, you can decommit them. So you might commit $100,000 for a roof project, and then something happens, you have a hailstorm and insurance covers it and gets you a new roof, and you realize, okay, we don't need that. Just again, by formal board motion or resolution, decommit those dollars, and now they're back available.
$100,000, that's a cheap roof.
Well, it's only for like a part of your building.
Oh, just patching it, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to just make a quick comment. The fund balance to something that we haven't touched on is that fund balance carries us over for the months we don't get state aid. So just a reminder, when we're getting our July and August state aid, that's for expenses that we spent through June 30th. So we have a month, the entire month of September that we don't even get state aid. We don't get our state aid status reports until the 15th of October. So we haven't received any money from the state since August, and that was for June expenditures. So that fund balance, the 2 months is to carry us through till we start getting state aid again. So it's not always just it's a set aside. It's to cash flow to get us through when we don't have money coming in.
Yeah, we do not want to go get loans to make payroll.
Right. And a lot of the districts have to do that, apply for a loan to get us through, get them through.
Well, and having the higher fund balance.
Having that higher fund balance this year with COVID actually helped us out where we can compensate some of that. So I was happy that we did have that, availability to use.
Yeah. I will say the districts that I work with whose fund balances were 10% and lower are very concerned for this year. So, because you are going to have more funding cuts from the state.
So Cindy, what you're saying is really we haven't faced the consequences of COVID in the year that you were auditing. A lot of the consequences.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Coming in the 2021.
Yes, because even though the state pulled money away, you were closed. Some of your expenses dropped down, which helped compensate. So the state, I mean, just looking at the supplies that we talked about, the professional development, the supplies, the utilities, that was $180,000 cut. The state took away $275,000. So there's still like $100,000 swing there. But the Fed stepped in and saved the day and gave you even more than that in ESSER money and in the COVID relief dollars that came through state aid. So the Fed stepped in and gave you money, but there's no guarantee that they're going to do that again in 2021. But there is a guarantee that the state's still pulling $175 at least per pupil. So you're going to lose at least another $275,000 with potentially no additional federal money to make up for it. Not to mention your costs now with all the online, the virtual learning, the face-to-face, all the PPE, those costs are going up as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for your time. Thanks for having me. You have my contact information. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions along the way.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And thank you to Tricia for doing a good job. Hey, Kelly, can I have those? These don't work. Sorry. I can't. Okay, item agenda E, number 2, executive team update.
Okay, so I want to thank Cindy for the great presentation, very in-depth, and then also Tricia for doing the work behind the scenes and throughout the year, so that we can have what she did describe in the committee meeting as a clean audit. So that just speaks mounds to the dedication and thoroughness that Tricia has in what she does, which is a tough job. No one likes the business person, really. It's tough. You have to be the person that says no. And to do that and to continue to have us be in good standing is awesome. So thank you, Tricia. So with that being said, we are going to have some executive team updates. Daryl is not here, so he will not have his report. I believe it may be in the packet as well. But we'll start off with Tricia. We can kind of piggyback off of that. And then we'll have Mark Curlin to join us. Mark, before you start, I want to just step in and do the COVID extended plan. And then after that, we'll have a quick presentation by Mark Fry. He's going to talk about some of the work that he's doing. And what I'm doing each month, we'll have one of our building leaders or our program leaders to come in and just do a quick presentation around their work, kind of like a focus highlight section. So, okay.
Good evening, everyone. My report this month showed obviously that the audit would be presented. We're happy with those findings. The result there, we are taking care of the food service equity by we've refinished the floor in there, and we've also have a full-time food service director now with benefits, so that will also cut into the excess equity. We've hired Catherine Dahmer. She is helping out in Copy Central and Transportation Dispatch, and she will be receiving her DOT physical to drive a bus at the end of this month. So hopefully that will alleviate some of the stress in that department. We also have state troopers that will be riding, excuse me, my voice is going, that will be riding a couple of our buses this week. It's called Operation Safe Stop. So we've had several, actually two, in one bus this last week where they've been passed on their reds. And so for safety for our kids, the state police department reached out to us and said, hey, do you have some buses we can ride, and to try to crack down on that. So we took them up on that. So they'll be riding on Thursday, the AM and the PM routes. So we're happy to have them. Thrilled that they're working with us with safety for our kids. I do a lot of reporting, as everybody knows. So the special education report, transportation reports all have to be done in the month of September. We also have finished our consolidated application, and our title grants have all been awarded. Now we'll do the final expenditure reports now that the audit's done. So we'll be able to have some carryover funds there. I've sent those title allocations out to all the administrators so they know what's been approved and what we need to allocate for the carryover. The FID timeline, that's financial infrastructure database. That's all the stuff that you were just presented from the audit. All goes into and uploaded into like the My School data and those types of things, so that we can compare ourselves with other districts in the state of Michigan. They've extended our deadline from November 1st to December 1st this year, so that gives us a little bit of extra time. Preliminary counts are in. If you didn't know, count day was October 7th. So we're down about to 1,318 students for the full FTEs. And then our virtual program, that's just the K or the 5 through 12, has accepted 206 as of last count for their program. Those are not full FTE kids because we have to pay the My Virtual part of that FTE. And we're still in need of school bus drivers. We do have an interview tomorrow. We've been advertising excessively on Indeed. We've reached out, obviously, maybe you've got the instant alert if you have kids in the district, begging for anybody who can drive, that would like to drive. We'll have some training later on this fall for those who don't have a CDL, but who would like to have a CDL. We've offered some incentives. We've done some Facebook posts, just reaching out at any place we can. Because our ridership is also down with COVID and all the virtual kids, we are redesigning our routes as well, trying to get the most kids that we can get picked up with the least amount of drivers, because we can't find people to hire, and we're not alone. The entire state is in that same situation. I also had a question, Kelly had a question last board meeting that I brought the results for that with me. That was in regards to the Orchards Hill check that was done. So I just wanted to let everybody know that I did have Lindsay pulled a nice report for me, and all the deposits that added up for that fundraiser was in excess of $10,000. It was $10,185, and then the check to Orchard Hills was $2,895. So that fundraiser was a profit to our athletic funds of $7,290. Does anybody have any questions on my report?
Tricia, you mentioned that the virtual is not full FTE. So what do you know what percentage that ends up being?
Well, we have a contract with the virtual for the kids that they already had. So last year we had 55 kids in that program instead of the 206. So the contract is for $4,750 of our FTE. However, we've come to an agreement this year because the way that the FTE, the state's paying our FTE, is based on a new formula from last year's count and this year's count. So they've agreed to lower the cost in conjunction with the lower FTE that the state's going to give us. I won't have that exact cost percentage until they bill us when we get the count solidified. I think that's due to the state by the first part of November. But they did work with us to reduce that cost, so it's not the full. We'll pay the full $4,750 on those 55 students or more that we had originally, that we're getting our original state aid on, and then the additional students, the 150 some, will just pay the reduced amount on. So they are working with us on that. Any other questions?
Thank you, Tricia.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mark, if you can hold on. Phil, will you go ahead and do your report now? Thank you.
I can hear you, Phil.
Thank you, Phil.
Okay, so I'm gonna push Mark Curlin back. One more person, so we're gonna let Mark Fry go with his presentation. Go ahead, Mark.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me. First, I'll start with CTE. I haven't got to talk to you guys in a while, so I figured I would go back a little bit here. But during the spring closure, Cisco was expanded into 2 sections, which doesn't sound like much, but it increased our student population by another 20 students that we were able to bring in from other schools, which is great. We bought a bunch of new tables and lab stations, and so the room was really opened up and cleaned up. So when we can get back in person with you guys and show you tours and stuff, we'd love to take you in there. Also with CTE, with our Perkins Fund this year, we were able to buy new laptops for our digital class, a reach-in fridge for our culinary class, and a new giant tool chest for our auto class. So those are all great expenses that we were able to purchase for our classes, and our kids are really jacked up. PVA-wise, we, as you guys have seen, we've grown quite a bit this year due to COVID. We have 203 in the class, and the highlights that I want to point out, though, is it was initially a slow start because of just the influx of applications we had. But with that, all the students are online now and working hard, and we have 14 that are scheduled to actually graduate before Christmas break or around the end of the semester. So that would be right around where we finished last year in total. And then with that also, we have another 10 that, if they just work at the bare minimum, should graduate also by the end of the year. That's if they didn't work hard. I mean, if we had a bunch of students that worked harder, they would obviously graduate as well. So that would actually increase our graduation rate by 9 students, as long as things go the way we hope they will. Also, it's good to know we did a survey with them we said at the end of the semester, what were your plans? And 30 for sure have said they're coming back. 15 said they'd probably stay in for the year, and 93 didn't know. We still are waiting on 65 other responses, but we want to keep you guys up to date on those because we want to know what our numbers look like coming the second semester. Then athletically, we're nearing the end of the fall here. Most sports are starting to wrap things up. Tennis finished 3rd in the conference. Soccer finished 4th, cross country 3rd, and is heading into their pre-regional this weekend. Middle school cross country both won their regionals. Our first currently ranked 6th in the state, and volleyball has conference playoffs this weekend. So pretty exciting times for our athletics. I only wish we could have more fans, but that'll come with time. So if there's any questions about any of the categories, I'd love to take them and try to answer them for you.
I want to say congratulations to all the athletes and the coaches, and just very proud of our Bucks. And thank you for all that information on CTE. I like that the survey for the second semester to keep a heads up on the numbers is a good idea. So thank you for doing that too, Mark.
No problem.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, Mark Curlin is going to go, but before he does, I do want to talk about the extended COVID-19 plan. So this school year, I think it was August, end of August, right behind the preparedness plans that all of the schools had to prepare, came the extended COVID-19 plan. This plan is required for school districts to receive state aid. It does not replace the big plan that we all talked about, we approved, but it's an extension of that, just like an addendum. So what this plan will do, it gives us a couple of assurances, and including educational goals, instructional delivery, grading, and equitable access. So what it does assure is that the district will administer approved benchmark assessment for K through 8. And for our district, it's NWEA. When virtual or remote instruction is used, we must provide equitable access to technology and internet necessary to participate. So we do have a plan for that. We do have, parents can come to our parking lots. We have a backup plan if they can't access those. We are using flash drives. So we have some backup plans to the backup plans. Expose students to appropriate standards. All the plans are aligned to our state standards. Continue to consult with the local health department to determine appropriate instructional delivery methods. I continue to be on the calls weekly with our health department. Instructional delivery will align to what is in the plan. So as our plans change, if we need to update those, we'll update them as well within the big roadmap plan. Reconfirm how instruction will be delivered will happen on a monthly basis. So every month we will have to reconfirm our plan. So Mark is going to talk about that. And as the big plan gets updated, I want to bring that plan to the table too for it to be updated and approved as well. The other thing is we'll address students with disabilities and make sure that they receive equitable access. We work with Karen Falkenstein to make sure that happens. She reviews all of our plans as well. And then we will ensure that two-way communication happens for at least 75% of our enrolled students. So we have documentation to make sure that happens for our online students, our face-to-face kids. That's two-way communication automatically. So within your packet, there's going to be an approval for our extended, I'm going to ask that you approve our extended COVID-19 plan. And then moving forward each month, Mark is going to present what the confirming of our plan will look like. So, all right, that's it. Mark?
All right, good evening. Thank you, Trish and George. I'm going to attempt to present something from my computer. Let's see how it goes. All right, this was in your board packet today, and you should be able to see this. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Berrien County COVID dashboard that includes Buchanan Community Schools data. This link is on our resource page, which is on the home page. And so if you click on that, I'm going to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. It'll kind of tell you, you'll be able to look school district by school district in the county and see how many COVID cases that we have in our district versus other districts, along with probable cases. A probable case is defined as a staff member or student has come in close contact with a person who has tested positive for COVID-19 and was determined to be in high risk during the disease investigation, and they became symptomatic in the 2 weeks after. They may not have been tested yet. So when I put this report together for the board last week, we had 4 positive cases and 1 probable. I noted today that it changed slightly. So I'm going to click and I'll show you what it looks like right now. You can see various districts are listed there. If you slide down to Buchanan, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th one down, you'll see that as of today, we had 4 positive cases, but no probable. So that probable case turned into was not positive, and we're okay right now. So right now we technically have 4 cases. You can see other districts have 5, and so on. So just wanted you, the board, and the public to know that that data is coming from the health department. That's not coming from Buchanan Community Schools. So the health department updates that supposedly with every 24 hours. And so it will adjust accordingly on the homepage. And so that's it's on the resource page on the Buchanan Community Schools homepage. Any questions on that, first of all?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. I'm going to slide back then. The next thing on the docket was the extended plan. That link is also on the homepage. It's also on the transparency page of the homepage, which is a requirement. And Patricia already talked about that. The next thing is she talked about the reconfirmation meeting. I'm going to click on a sample that you're going to see starting next month. This is the one for September, just as a trial basis. This is required by the state, and this link is also posted on the transparency page underneath COVID extended learning plan. It's one of the links that we posted there. Every month we have to have a meeting with the community, and we're still working out how to do that. I'm guessing it's going to be virtual, so we'll get back to that. But we have to go through and we have to answer these questions every month. So we have to reconfirm how instruction is going to be delivered during each month. We have to have public comments from parents or guardians on the extended learning plan. So we'll have a public meeting, probably virtual, to allow people to ask questions or give input on how things are going. And then we have to review the 2-week interaction rates for those kids that are on remote. Right now, we're doing a trial run with Ottawa and Moccasin for this month. So we had them report out on September. And so just for September, this is what the report would look like that I would be presenting to the board, or Trish will be presenting to the board each month. So Buchanan Community Schools confirms for the month of September, the majority of the schools was through in-person instruction. We do offer remote learning for K4, one class at each level. That could change depending on what happens in the state, but that's what it would have been for the month of September. And then you can see that we confirmed in-person instruction for pre-kindergarten. K through 4 was in-person. Middle school and high school is in-person instruction. And that we had high levels of in-person instruction for English language learners and special education students or special POPs. Again, that could change on a monthly basis depending on what phase we're in. Right now we're in phase 4, so we're in person. Public comments, we didn't have any for this meeting because this was just a trial run so that I could give you and the community an idea of what the report will look like. But for the next meeting, we'll have some comments in there, hopefully. We'll give people a chance to interact with us. But you can see next down below is each month you have to review the 2-way communication rates, what they were. And so week 1, you can see, for example, we're reporting on Ottawa and Moccasin, and we did it by grade. So just for example, week 1, K, 95% of the students had a 2-way communication with their teachers. First grade was 60%. Moccasin had 75%. In second grade, third grade, 89%. Fourth grade, 100%. And then you can see week 2, week 3, and week 4. Just kind of giving you an example of what it looks like. And just to let you know, we had a remote meeting with the teachers today. And we appreciate all the parents that are supporting them and interacting with their teachers. We know it's tough when you're working at home. These students and parents chose to be remote. And so we appreciate their efforts working with the teachers. And I appreciate the principals working with their staff members and getting the data into our form here. So every month there'll be some type of report that'll look like this for you. Just wanted to give you an example of what it would look like. Did anybody have any questions for me?
So Mark, when did you say the community meetings would start taking place?
We're looking at before the next meeting. So the next board meeting is on the 16th, I believe. My thought was maybe have it at 5 p.m. on that day, or it might be maybe the Thursday before. We'll get back to people. We'll post that on the district homepage and maybe do a power announcement so that we can get a link out there of where people could interact. We were kind of waiting to decide on how the Open Meetings Act was going to go. So I'm guessing the meeting will be virtual, maybe some type of town hall meeting like we did before with me, is what I'm thinking right now.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
Thank you for that information, Mark.
All right, no problem. I'm all set, Trish.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, team.
Okay, item agenda F, superintendent department reports.
Okay, so first on the agenda, we have the Buck Staff Appreciation October winner, Shelly Leeds. And I do want to read her, and she was nominated by Karen Falkenstein. She is a speech and language pathologist at Ottawa. And I do want to read what Karen submitted. Shelley is truly deserving of the Buck Staff Appreciation and Recognition Award. She is the lead speech and language pathologist in the Buchanan Community School System and services students at the high school, the middle school, and Ottawa. She has been the mentor clinician for the clinical fellowship year for several first-year SLPs in Buchanan, including her two current SLP colleagues, Maggie and Brittany. The CF involves a mentor professional experience after completion of academic coursework and clinical practicum. During the CF year, Shelley assists each SLP in the following areas: the integration and application of theoretical knowledge from their academic training and evaluation of their strengths and identification of their limitations, the development and refinement of their clinical skills consistent with the ASHA speech and language pathology scope of practice, advancement from supported supervision to independent practitioner. Her communication style is inclusive, thus ensuring the necessary parties have all the information needed to make quality decisions. She is especially supportive of the 3 to 5 year olds and their families that she works with in the early childhood special education classroom. Shelley generously gives of her personal time and energy at night and on weekends to prepare her monthly Medicaid reports, annual or initial IEPs, and clinical evaluation reports for those students she is assessing for language or articulation delays. Her priority is always what is best for Buchanan students. Her professional and personal commitment to Buchanan students and families is exceptional. I greatly value her expertise and wisdom in all areas of special education, submitted by Karen Falkenstein. So I appreciate you for doing all that you do, and especially with servicing and helping other practitioners do their work. So Shelley, congratulations again.
Congratulations, Shelley.
Makes you want to clap, right?
Is there a button for that?
Okay, item agenda F, superintendent, the Buck Staff Appreciation nominees.
So I do want to send out a special congratulations to all of those who were nominated. Abby Cantu, she is a Buchanan High School Administrative Assistant. Brenda Hemphill, Moccasin 4th grade teacher. Dr. Michael Dunn, Moccasin Elementary Principal. Kristen Wallstrom, Buchanan Community Schools Transportation. Marion Hurd, Ottawa Elementary School Administrative Assistant. And Trinity Young, Buchanan Middle Schools Media Assistant. And Wendy Murphy, Ottawa Elementary School Literacy Coach. Everyone keep up the good work, and we appreciate you so much.
Okay. Item agenda F, number 3, board updates. Everyone read through all the updates. Was there any questions or concerns, comments?
Nope.
Not at this time.
Okay. Item agenda G, community dialogue, citizens concerns. And I don't believe we have any, but let me just make sure. And no, we do not have any at this time.
Cindy, I do have one thing to say. So we don't have any today, but I do want to let the community know that moving forward, as concerns come to the board and you discuss them, decisions are made or something is responded to, we're going to put that information directly on the website. There's a section that says community dialogue responses, and it's just a one-way out. So there's no two-way communication, but I want to make sure that all the community knows where it's going to be posted, and it will be there on the website. And it'll also be included in the minutes as well.
Okay, thank you. Item agenda H, adoption of consent agenda. Can we have a motion, please?
I move the consent agenda for the regular board meeting of October 19th, 2020 be adopted as written. 1, the minutes from the regular meeting of 9/21/20. 2, warrants, expenditure reports, and payroll September. 3, recommendations to hire as submitted by BCS Operations Supervisor, Mr. Daryl Miller, Food Service Supervisor, Mrs. Becky Kaltenbach, Director of Technology, Mr. Phil Place, and Business Director, Mrs. Tricia Lowry. recommended employees, Larry Klein, operations utility staff, Carly Miller, cook's helper, Jesse Lane, assistant IT support specialist internship, Catherine Domer, transportation regular backup bus driver. 4, staff resignations as submitted, Lindsay Haroff, JV girls basketball coach, Kristen Wallstrom, BCS bus driver, Victoria Whitfield, operations utility staff. 5, maternity leave as submitted, Abby Cantu, BHS administrative assistant principal.
I'll second that.
Set on a separate.
Okay, any questions or concerns from board members? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Burnett,
Yes.
Miss Ryder,
Yes.
Mr. Wentworth,
Yes.
Mr. DeVlamic,
Yes.
Miss Lush, yes, Miss Vogler,
Yes.
7, motion is adopted.
Item agenda I, recommended action other. Can we have a motion, please, for closed session?
You're not on, sorry.
I make a motion that the Buchanan Board of Education moves into closed session for a hearing on student discipline, student 6000653.
Roll call, please.
Support.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we didn't.
Okay. Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Burnett,
Yes.
Miss Ryder, Mr. Wentworth,
Yes.
Mr. DeVlamic,
Yes.
Miss Lush, yes, Miss Tobler,
Yes.
motion adopted, and we are 7:16 for the time.
Okay, community, we will be leaving now for closed session and then we will return. back, and can we please have a motion for go back into open session?
I move the Board of Education resolves to return to open session.
Support.
Am I on?
Roll call, please.
Roll call, please.
We are back in at 7:37 too, sorry. Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Burnett,
Yes.
Ms. Ryder.
Yes.
Mr. Wentworth,
Yes.
Mr. DeVomic,
Yes.
Ms. Lush, yes, Ms. Tobler.
Yes.
Motion adopted.
Okay. Item agenda I. Number 4, certified staff maternity leave.
The expulsion.
3.
You missed three. You have it in there?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Got it.
Okay, we need a motion for a resolution, please.
I'll make a motion that the Buchanan Board of Education adopts the following resolution. Whereas the administration has presented to the Board of Education a recommendation concerning the expulsion of a student who was in violation of Buchanan School Board Policy number 5500 and 5530 on Tuesday, October 13, 2020. And whereas the administration has notified the student and parents involved of the accusations against the student, their recommendation of expulsion and the rights to a hearing on this date. Now therefore be it resolved, the Buchanan Board of Education hereby chooses to expel student number 600653 from attendance in the Buchanan Community Schools effective immediately for the remainder of the 2020-21 school year, with the following conditions to be met for possible reinstatement to Buchanan High School for the first semester of
That's wrong.
the 2021-2022 school year through the remainder of the second semester of 2021 school year. We request that student 600653 successfully complete the current school year while attending BVA, the step-up program, or another alternative setting. And 2, the student must have a substance abuse evaluation / counseling completed with an outside the school district professional prior to readmittance with the readmittance meeting with the superintendent of the Board of Communications, with the responsibility of this cost being with the parent or guardian. Upon the completion of the first 2 steps, the student and parent guardians must contact the superintendent of Buchanan Community Schools to schedule a readmittance hearing back into Buchanan Community Schools.
Support.
Oh, there's a 4th one.
Yeah, there's a 4th one.
Sorry.
Any recommendation will be reviewed by the Buchanan School Board before a decision to reinstate student 600653 will be made. Student may be readmitted if all board policies have been met.
Support.
Any questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Burnett,
Yes.
Ms. Ryder,
Yes.
Mr. Wentworth,
Yes.
Mr. DeVomic,
Yes.
Ms. Lush, yes, Ms. Tobler.
Yes.
7 yeas, motion adopted.
Okay, now we can go on to the certified staff maternity leave motion, please.
I make a motion, the Buchanan Board of Education grants maternity leave to Haley Sater, Moccasin Elementary 3rd grade teacher, beginning approximately October 22nd, 2020, in accordance with Article Section A1B, using all accumulated sick days with any remaining days to be unpaid according to the Family Medical Leave Act. Bargaining any complications, she would return to her position as the 3rd grade teacher at the start of the 2nd semester, January 25th, 2021.
Support. Any comments or questions from board members?
Congratulations.
New baby coming.
Yeah.
Roll
Another
call,
baby.
please.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Burnett,
Yes.
Ms. Ryder,
Yes.
Mr. Wentworth,
Yes.
Mr. Devon,
Yes.
Ms. Lesh, yes, Ms. Tobler.
Yes.
7 yes, motion adopted.
Recommend action number 5, cross guard service agreement. Motion, please.
Motion that the Buchanan Board of Education approves the proposed crossing guard service agreement as agreed between the Buchanan Community Schools and the City of Buchanan, effective for the 2020-2021 school year.
Support.
Questions or comments? Board members? Patricia? Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Burnett,
Yes.
Ms. Ryder,
Yes.
Mr. Wentworth,
Yes.
Mr. Devon,
Yes.
Ms. Lesh, yes, Ms. Tobler.
Yes.
7 yes, motion adopted.
Recommended action number 6, student handbook update. Motion, please.
I'll make a motion that the Buchanan Board of Education adopts the Ottawa and Moccasin Elementary Schools handbook updates for the
Support. Patricia?
No, I just want to thank the two principals for getting their information in. There were just a few minor updates to their handbooks, and we do have one more that will come before you to be adopted for this school year.
Okay, thank you. Board members?
No questions.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Lee,
yes.
Dr. Burnett,
Yes.
Ms. Ryder,
Yes.
Mr. Wentworth,
Yes.
Mr. Devon,
Yes.
Ms. Lesh, yes, Ms. Tobler.
Yes.
7 yes, motion adopted.
Recommend action number 7, Neola first reading. Motion, please.
I make a motion that the Buchanan Board of Education approves the first reading of the following Neola Volume 35, Number 1, revised and new policies. Policy 4362.01, threatening behavior to staff members. Policy 5610, removal, suspension, expulsion, and permanent exclusion of students. Policy 5611, due process as rights. Policy 7440, facility security, and finally, policy 850.01, protective facial coverings during pandemic, endemic, epidemic, and this is new.
Support.
Patricia?
So this is the first reading. The committee did get together. We met last week, went over the policies that you see here. The first policy, 4362.01, it provides clarity around the definition of threatening behavior. The second policy, 5610, is a revision, and it aligns with the new laws that are in place. Due process rights, it includes preponderance of evidence as the basis for evidence in students' investigations. And then it also defines how long we're supposed to keep records on file. So that's 3 years. Facility security is the automatic locks on the doors. It gives the superintendent the authority to do that if so need be. And also there is a requirement that we must communicate that information to the law enforcement officers and fire department. And then the last one is the protective facial coverings, which we have in place now, and it's for grades for our district grades K through 12.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from board members? Okay, roll call, please.
I thought he was raising his hand. Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Burnett,
Yes.
Ms. Ryder,
Yes.
Mr. Wentworth,
Yes.
Mr. Devonick,
Yes.
Ms. Lesh, yes, Ms. Tobler.
Yes.
7 yeses, motion adopted.
Recommend action number 8, extended COVID-19 learning plan. Motion, please.
I'll make a motion. The Buchanan Board of Education approves the extended COVID-19 learning plan for Buchanan Community Schools as presented by Buchanan administration.
Support. Patricia?
The only comment is, this is the plan that we talked about earlier, Mark and I. And so every month we'll be coming to you for an update to reconfirm the plan as well.
All right. Any questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Burnett,
Yes.
Ms. Ryder,
Yes.
Mr. Wentworth,
Yes.
Mr. Devonick,
Yes.
Ms. Lesh, yes, Ms. Tobler.
Yes.
7 yeses, motion is adopted.
Okay, recommended action number 9, resolution to grant emergency powers to the superintendent. Motion, please.
I move, whereas the COVID-19 pandemic continues to affect school operations due to the need to comply with executive orders, to comply with appropriate guidance on safety protocols for reopening schools and assuring appropriate educational services. And whereas the board intends to comply with its legal obligations, including relevant executive orders, and accordingly temporarily suspend or alter affected policies and guidelines as necessary to comply with its legal obligations and otherwise take required actions consistent with its legal obligations. And whereas the Board of Education finds that the current environment created by COVID-19 pandemic requires that the superintendent be granted greater flexibility to respond to quickly and appropriately to the evolving crisis, including assuring compliance with executive orders and also adapting to the changing environment, including provisions of alternative modes of instruction. And whereas under bylaw 0131.1, the operation of any section or sections of board policies not established by law or contract may be suspended temporarily by a majority vote of the board members at a public meeting held in compliance with law and board policy. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Buchanan Community Schools Board of Education grants to the superintendent the following temporary powers to address the COVID-19 emergency throughout the duration of the 2020-21 school year. Authority to temporarily waive such board policies or provisions of board policies as the superintendent shall deem necessary to comply with executive orders and with guidance from appropriate health or governmental authorities, or as necessary for effective response to COVID-19 related issues and implementation of the district's preparedness plan. B, authority to take any lawful actions necessary to comply with executive orders to ensure the continuation of public education, to provide for the health and safety of students, employees, or to respond to direction from appropriate health and governmental authorities. Such actions may include, but are not limited to, adjustments to the curriculum and the provisions of alternative educational program options, adjustments to the calendar, adjustments to employee work schedules and assignments, adjustments to delivery of school-provided meals, limitations on access to property owned or controlled by the Buchanan Community Schools, hiring of providers and or partnering with other districts or ISDs, applying to any governmental body for financial or other aid as may be available, and applying to any governmental body for waiver of regulations or requirements, compliance with which is affected by the COVID-19 emergency. C, authority to enter into contracts without board approval for any dollar amount necessary for the purchase of materials, equipment, supplies, or services for sanitation, cleaning, technology, or other needs directly related to the COVID-19 emergency situation, provided such action is consistent with all applicable state and federal laws. D, authority to institute new policies or procedures to implement the executive orders and or the preparedness plan, including but not limited to policies requiring face coverings, imposing mandatory quarantine measures, and limiting access to school buildings or educational extracurricular activities. Now, be it further resolved that the superintendent is directed to keep the Board of Education informed of any actions taken under this emergency authority as soon as is practical in light of the circumstances. Now be it further resolved that the temporary powers authorized by this resolution are in effect for the duration of the 2020-21 school year unless otherwise rescinded or extended by the board upon majority vote. Now be it further resolved that the execution of this resolution is conclusive evidence of the Board of Education's approval of this action and the authority granted.
Support.
Mrs. Robinson? Do you have anything?
So the only thing I will say for this is that this is only in the case of an emergency, and if we cannot, for me, if we can't meet in a timely manner. We know that COVID has changed the way we do things. However, my first job is to make sure that I'm communicating to you first and foremost. So I will make sure that that happens.
Thank you.
Questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Burnett,
Yes.
Ms. Ryder.
Yeah.
Mr. Wentworth,
Yes.
Mr. Devamic,
Yes.
Ms. Lesh, yes, Ms. Tobler.
Yes.
7 yeses, motion adopted.
Did we have any committee meetings to report on?
Yes, we have two committees. One, the Personnel Committee, and the other was the Policy Committee. Okay, go ahead, Ruth.
I was going to say the policy committee met on Wednesday, the 14th, at the library. We discussed the policies that we already had our first reading. We also discussed the administrative guideline 2431A with that new organizational structure, and we moved and changed a little bit of the wording in order to maintain an effective program of interscholastic athletics. The district employs an athletic coordinator. And then we discussed those that we just had our first reading. But we also discussed the fact that we currently have administrative guidelines for sections 2000, which is programs, 5000, which is students, 8000, which is operations. According to PO 0132.2, our superintendent is responsible for designing and implementing administrative guidelines. This will give the team and our superintendent groundwork to revise if needed instead of creating from scratch. So Mrs. Robinson asked that we purchase additional guidelines, and there were 2 quotes, one from Neola and one from Troon. Do you want me to go through those, Trish?
You can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Neola's cost, the basic package has already been purchased. And, it's $5,000 for administrative guidelines, 2450 per year for annual updates. Okay, so that is about $7,500. Now, under the true cost, there's a little bit up front, but in reality, we'll gain it back. To provide the quote for their policy services, we'd have to get their basic package, which is $7,000, administrative guidelines, which is $4,000, and then $2,500
or less for annual updates. Our understanding is that this would help Michelle out tremendously because she would not have to input each of those by hand. And so with administrative assistance time so tight and with everything else that's going on, this in the long run, although the first year will be a little bit more, in the long run, it will be less. And so the second year for spring costs would be 6,500 or less, but we'd also gain a lot of time that Michelle doesn't have to hand import. That basically
That's pretty much sums it up.
Okay.
And I did check around with some other districts to see who uses Trone. And within our area, I haven't found one yet. So that's the other. So instead, I'm still investigating which one is the best. Neola, of course, we can just get those right away. They're in place. We already have the basic package. Trone, though, those are our attorneys. And so it may be more prudent for us to go with them. So I just wanted to get some input from other districts that are using Trone policies. And I did ask one of the attorneys who's over that part in Trone to give me names of districts that are actually utilizing those policies.
It is fairly new for their policy thing. Didn't they just add that like 2 years ago or something?
A couple years ago.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I will mention that on that committee, including myself, was Harvey and Sandy.
Patricia, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Nope, that's it for that one.
Okay.
And the other one was personnel.
Let me read it. So we had a personnel committee meeting and it consisted of Patricia Robinson, Sandy Tobler, myself, and Ruth Ryder. And Patricia had brought forth some discussion items. Obviously, she came on board. I know we had made some cuts, but some of her observations were obviously the superintendent or the transportation supervisor had left, and we need to repost that. And there was a discussion of the pay that we are paying, how to get that more in line with Southwest Michigan, and the Southwest Michigan average salary is about $52,000. So we were looking to increase it, to $38,750. That would put us at the 25th percentile. Bus drivers, we're down 2 drivers, and we need ways to market the drivers. So we looking to increase the pay to $19 an hour. The current top bus driver is paid at $17.86 an hour. High school secretary, we just have the one secretary, and we know she's going to go on maternity leave, but we're just struggling in that area. And we discussed maybe going back to a full-time position where with this person working part-time for athletics and part-time for the high school principals. And the other thing is we went from 2 counselors to 1.5, discussing making that going back to a full-time position of two full-time counselors. So adding a counselor back in. And as far as personnel goals, we'll be outlining those in the next meeting. Tricia shared the need to meet more often to provide more communication to the communities and the board.
Okay.
That's it.
Good.
Thank you. Patricia, did you have anything to add to that?
I just want to thank both committees. Want to talk too about just a little bit about the counselors. So there's a lot of things that our kids are dealing with now, being COVID. You're in school, you're wearing masks. They've come off of being out of school for so many months. They're catching up. So just to give you kind of the picture of the need of counselors now, not just at the high school, but at all levels. So if we can find other ways and other dollars too, that we can get that into every school, it is a great need now.
Okay.
And I would like to add that we're still looking to that social worker, and that will help as well. And that is part of the budget and part of the plan.
Okay, and there's something I would like to say tonight. And this is personally coming from me. This is not coming from the board. I appreciate all of those that are contending for the school board positions. Being on the board now is more important than ever, as our district and districts all over are adjusting to the COVID-19 pandemic. I know all too well how dynamic this job is. I have enjoyed serving on the Buchanan School Board and look forward to the next season of my life where I step down and allow another to fill the position. Buchanan is a community that I love and cherish deeply. I'm proud of our town, and we were just recognized as the nicest town in America. With that being said, I would also like to bring forth a significant concern. In the last few days, I have noticed signs around the town that state "Dump Dennis." I am disgusted at this. We as a nation are stepping into a big election this year. As a small town with an excellent school system, we also face a big election here in our town. Like myself, some people in our community will step down from roles we have held very dear to our hearts. Others will step into these positions, but the composure, poise, and respect during this time of supporting those we plan to vote for should be held at a high standard. I have always believed that Buchanan was a small town with big values. I have fought to ensure children not only be raised with outstanding educational opportunities, but I have also fought to keep respect, decency, and moral values upheld in our district. This sign is not only disrespectful, rude, and unkind, it truly hurts my heart. Nobody that has stepped up to serve our community should be treated with such incivility. I would also love to share a piece of advice for those running this year for the school board. You win your seat by showing the community that you support its school systems. You win by showing your volunteer record, developing relationships with other board members, showing the community you can work as a team member, and developing relationships with people in the community. You show up to the games and you show up to the elementary open houses, you get behind programs like the Buchanan Promise, and you show the community that you are a voice that will lift the community up and protect the schools their children will attend. I want to wish each and every candidate the best of luck. I hope that tomorrow will be a new day where we can support candidates who want to invest in our community by lifting them up, not tearing down the others. I hope our community will stand firm on the values that we want to be passed on to our children. I hope that if someone comes to you with a yard sign meant to slander a member of the community, you will look at them, question their integrity, and remind them you live in a small town with a big heart, and you will not support an individual by slandering another. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy.
Thank you, Sandy.
Does any other board member have anything?
Thank you, Sandy, for your comment there. Appreciate it. Just a update. Since we couldn't have regular DARE graduation for our students that are now in 6th grade, Shelby has put together a simple graduation for them on Wednesday during their lunch period. So we will be graduating those DARE students during lunch Wednesday. I won't be singing this year as far as at lunch for them, but I will probably do some kind of special singing and record it and put it online for them. So
Yes, you must. They look forward to that every year. Thank you, Harvey. Anything else from anyone? Okay. Our next board meeting is Monday, November 16th at 6 p.m. Have a great evening, everyone. Meeting adjourned.